Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Grand Page. I am your most humble and obedient servant, Page Ghost. Last week, at least I think it was last week, I uploaded a video about sort of my history with the Castlevania franchise, my video game experience, and a little bit on the Castlevania series on Netflix. A reason why I talked about that is because I was kind of going through a bit of a Castlevania binge, and I was about to finish up the series, and I wanted to sort of have a precursor to the larger conversation around the Netflix series itself. And that's what we're going to do today, is talk about the Netflix series, its highs, its lows, interesting points, things of that nature. In general, my recommendations for the franchise, you can go watch my other video to get a more in-depth take, but basically, I recommend Super Castlevania 4. I recommend most, if not all, of the DS titles, particularly Order of Ecclesia. That's the one that introduced me to Castlevania proper. I beat that several times. I still enjoy it a lot. It's a good story, good characters, that sort of thing. Of course, Symphony of the Night, fantastic. Most of y'all have probably played Symphony of the Night, even if you're not a Castlevania fan. I bet there are people that have played Symphony of the Night. But those are just, bare bones, my recommendations. I'd recommend looking at my previous video on Castlevania to get some more in-depth takes on some of those games and whatnot. But today specifically, I wanted to talk about the Castlevania series. I finally finished all 4 seasons, and this series has been out for a good while, and I actually started watching it when it first came out. But just life happened as the series continued to get released. I started going to college, and I started working as a teacher. I started having a family, things of that nature. So things just kind of started happening. I got interested in other things, and it just got put on the back burner. But I finally finished it. I'm glad I did. And before I go into any depth or anything, I'll just go ahead and put it out there in case you just want to get to the end at the beginning. I recommend the series. I recommend particularly the first 2 seasons, because really, you combine those first 2 seasons into one season, you get a whole story out of it. And if you want to end it after that second season, totally fine. But if you are invested and you want to see where else the series goes, I would say that the best seasons are the first 2, but I will also say that the series has a very satisfying conclusion. And so, with that understanding that seasons 3 and 4 are not nearly as good as seasons 1 and 2, but you're just, you invested in the characters, you want to see where they go, and they go interesting places still. It's just not nearly as interesting as seasons 1 and 2. But I would argue personally still definitely worth a watch, the entire series overall. But, so to get into the discussion proper, just to kind of give an overview as we talk about the different seasons. So the first season really was more of a preview, sort of almost like a teaser season. I think Netflix was like, hey, this is a lot to invest into animation. Like any, media development, particularly animation or even live action, it comes with its own, expenses, and it can be really expensive, particularly to make it good. And so Netflix, I wouldn't be surprised if, the talks at Netflix were like, hey, we got this really good idea for Castlevania, we'd really like to go through with it, but we don't know if it's going to take off. Let's put out, I think it's like 3 episodes. It's really not a lot. That first season really isn't a whole lot. It might be more than 3 episodes, but it's certainly not a lot of episodes. Each episode is like 20 to 30 minutes. And it really is just a preview for what is to come. And funny enough, the series actually starts with backstory on Dracula, specifically how he meets Lisa, his wife. And quite frankly, that characterization of Dracula and Lisa probably is the best characterization in the show. Maybe Trevor Belmont and even just the trio of Trevor, Sypha, and Alucard. They have interesting characterization too, but you could make the argument that the Dracula and Lisa dynamic is the strongest characterization in what Dracula ultimately goes through as the series goes on. But yeah, so the series in season one opens up with Dracula, his motivations, why he wants to destroy humanity. Very, very interesting. You definitely buy into it. You feel for him. Not necessarily saying that, like, oh, it's totally okay what he's doing, but you're like, oh, yeah, I get it. And also, what I really, really like about this, so I forget what video I talked about it in. But I've talked previously about how a lot of times movies, media, whatever the case, like to talk about the hell or demon aspect of mythologies, of Christianity, things of that nature, but they don't really want to touch the God stuff very much, whether they're come to think of it, maybe they're worried about representing it inaccurately, in which case I get it. But at the same time, it's weird to talk about demons, it's weird to talk about hell, the devil, stuff like that, and not have the other half mentioned at all. Here in this first season of Castlevania, I feel like they actually do a really, really good job. Where it's not, I'm not saying they're like, they show God or Jesus or anything like that, but they do talk about him, I think, in a way that is at least consistent with Christian theology. And for anybody who's seen the Castlevania series, particularly that moment when the bishop is in the cathedral in the church, and then the demons enter the church. People, the layman, the not Christian, the regular guy, Joe Schmo, whatever, will watch that scene and it's like, yeah, totally justified. It makes a lot of sense. But even Christians, myself in particular, will watch that scene and it's like, no, this makes a lot of sense. It's very consistent with Christianity. There's a few pieces here and there that's a little bit iffy, but it's also, those iffy bits are coming from a demon, and so it's like, how much of what the demon is saying is truth, how much of the lies that he's saying does he believe. It's a very interesting moment in the show that recognizes the other half. And I feel like Castlevania, the first season, did a really, really good job with that. And then the series, the first season basically ends with Alucard, Trevor, Sypha all teaming up, and you find out as the viewer that this is basically Dracula's. What? I don't know if it'd be Dracula's curse necessarily. So the third game in the Castlevania series has Trevor, Alucard, and Sypha as playable characters. I don't know if this first season is necessarily a sort of a show telling of that game necessarily. Again, like my previous video that I said, I never actually finished Castlevania 3 because that one's a tough one. But it at least does take inspiration, at least with the characters and whatnot, and things of that nature. Also, just a sort of general talk about the show itself, all four seasons. A lot of Easter eggs in it. A lot of characters that fans of the series, fans of the video games, they'll see the characters and be like, oh, that's that character from that game. Apparently, the characters Isaac and Hector are from one of the video games. I don't know which video game. I feel like I've played a lot of the Castlevania series, but admittedly, like I haven't played any of the Lords of Shadow, and I think those are sort of the big ones that I haven't played. So maybe they're in that one, or maybe they're in an older game that I'm not familiar with. But so a lot of Easter eggs that the gamers will appreciate, but also the story itself is very interesting. Like I said, they developed Dracula's backstory very well in the first season. They bring the trio together who plan on stopping Dracula, and that was told in a very interesting way. Trevor's story and the fall of the Belmonts, very, very interesting. Sypha's group that she's with and what she's trying to accomplish is very interesting. And like I said, those first two seasons really go together. And the second season has a very, very satisfying conclusion. But more importantly, they commit to a particular decision. I'll go ahead and spoil it because this show has been out for almost a decade now. They kill off Dracula at the end of season 2, and they don't bring him back again in the show to be an antagonist, to be a villain. And I thought that was a very risky move. Because the Castlevania video game franchise, like basically every game you're fighting Dracula, right? The Belmonts kill him, and then like for 100 years or something like that, he's dead. And then at some point he comes back. That's the recurring motif or trope or whatever you want to call it. But they commit to that decision. And that had to have been a tough decision to commit to, especially for how well received Dracula was as a character. And for them to commit to that, I applaud them. It would have been so... I can't begin to imagine how tempting it must have been for them to be like, oh, well, let's bring him back here. No, they said, hey, we killed him. He's dead. The villain's dead. Leave it alone. So I applaud them for that. That being said, after season 2, season 3, I've heard it described as a setup season. I would say that's fairly accurate. We basically see the setup of the new big bad vampire, Carmilla, her sisters, and actually the scheming of Carmilla actually began back in season 2, and it kind of comes to fruition in season 3. We also see Hector and Isaac and the build-ups of their characters and what they're going through. Also, we're introduced to a new character called Saint Germain, and he's interesting in figuring out his backstory. But season 3, a lot of it is set up for season 4. It still has that quality that seasons 1 and 2 and even 4 have, but upon like my reflection on it, aside from some there's not like a standout moment per se. Like the first season has standout moments of like Dracula attacking a city. It has the standout moment of like Trevor and Alucard fighting for the first time. Season 2 has a standout moment of Alucard, Sypha, and Trevor attacking Castlevania and taking on Dracula. Season 3, there's a lot of characterization going on, and you kind of know what's going on with them. Isaac and Hector are having their struggles where they are. Trevor and Sypha have gone off to continue fighting the demon hordes because they're still coming from hell. And then Alucard is dealing with being alone, dealing with the fact that he is, in fact, Dracula's son, and that the connotation that comes with that, and how other people receive him as that. But there's not necessarily like a major sort of standout moment. The Isaac, I forget the exact context of it, but he's building up an army and he takes over a city in season 3. That was pretty cool. And then Alucard starts basically doing what his father did to keep people away. He starts putting dead bodies on stakes outside the castle. So that's interesting. But really, season 3 is a setup for season 4. And season 4 has a very, very satisfying conclusion, although they don't do a great job of setting it up. There's a lot of conveniences. Trevor Belmont happens to find certain tools at particular times that just so happen to help with particular scenarios. For example, he and Sypha stumble upon a group underground in the catacombs of a city, and they're hoarding this treasure. And among the treasure, lo and behold, he finds the cross weapon, the cross sub weapon you might remember from the video games. And it has an interesting in-world explanation for why it works against vampires so well that isn't like Christianity based. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. It just kind of gets rid of the mythological aspect and makes it a little more realistic, but there's nothing wrong with it. I found the explanation kind of interesting. But it is a bit convenient that he just stumbles upon this weapon, and then he happened to stumble upon another weapon that you never see that helps him in the final fight. So it's just a little too convenient here and there. But also the reveal that the vampire Varney has secretly been Death the entire time, that really came out of nowhere. Maybe I gotta rewatch it again, and I will, because it was a great show. But yeah, I really don't remember anything building up to that reveal. And it was shocking because of the fact that Varney was Death the entire time. It makes sense to an extent that Death would sort of hide himself, and he would hang out with Dracula so much because of all the death that was occurring. But I don't know. It was just a little too convenient for me. Maybe someone that watches this can give me a good explanation, or maybe I just need to rewatch it. Despite the conveniences, that final fight between Trevor and Death, really, really good last fight. Little nitpick. There's this piece where Trevor says, "We," talking to Death, but also apparently talking to himself, "we're just killers of history." Trevor comes off as an apathetic character at the beginning of the series, particularly in season 1. Because like he lost everything. He lost his family. People threw away the Belmont family after it felt like that they were no longer needed. And so I always kind of saw Trevor as this sort of Han Solo-like character that really didn't care, very apathetic towards people suffering. He really was just looking for the next place for him to get a beer, get some food, and get some sleep. He was never really looking for much else past that. He had a lot of building characterization. He learned to work with Alucard, a vampire. He develops a relationship with Sypha, which is interesting. And also a little side note, they have that moment before Trevor fights Death. Trevor and Sypha. Trevor tells Sypha that he loves her, and Sypha says, "I know." I really appreciate the way that she said that. So like it's clearly an allusion to Han Solo and Princess Leia. Princess Leia telling Han Solo, "I love you." Him saying, "I know." Um, that's sort of his weird way of saying "I love you" back to Princess Leia. But I liked this because uh, so Trevor being sort of this apathetic character, learning to care about people and whatnot, showing emotions. He has this sort of rare moment with Sypha where he opens his heart to her, and so she's kind of realizing that, and it kind of it catches her off guard. It breaks her a little bit. She's wondering about the implications of what he's saying and about what he's about to do. And to an extent, you could argue that she doesn't really know how to respond except to show Trevor that she understands that he loves her, and that she and that there's a deeper meaning under that, and that she accepts his love. And that is it's just it's only lasts like a few seconds, but I feel like it was a very powerful moment in the show. And then just a few seconds later, I feel like that gets undercut by Trevor saying, "We, him and death. I am just a killer of history. It's time for us to go." That's not an accurate characterization or representation of Trevor's character. I don't see how he's a killer of history. It didn't make any sense. Everything else with that speech towards death works very, very well. Calling death a thing, he runs and hides, he eats, in that he recognizes that he's taking on this sort of larger than life entity, this representation of a thing that happens to living things. And so he kind of recognizes that maybe this is a futile effort, this is a futile gesture, but it doesn't change the fact that I'm going to give it a try, see how it goes. My only other maybe critique of the show, it gets worse as it goes on. I'd say the first two seasons aren't nearly as bad with it, but that the cursing. Here's the thing about foul language. I'm not against it in storytelling whatsoever. So let me be clear about that. I'm not against it. However, having it be every other word doesn't make your story, your show, your movie edgy. It just means that the word means nothing. And we know as the viewer that you're putting it in there because you think it means something. Otherwise, you wouldn't be putting it in there. There are exceptions to this. Things like Deadpool, right? Where he's clearly just this vulgar, vile, disgusting character. That's part of who he is. To an extent, Trevor might have aspects of that, but even still, it's not like he's dropping F-bombs. He shouldn't be dropping F-bombs every other sentence. And to be fair, he doesn't. It's other characters. Mostly, but they don't characterize those characters well enough, I feel like, to justify the constant cursing. I feel like the constant foul language is there to show, hey, we're Netflix, we can do this sort of thing. So I feel like that was very misplaced. Particularly, I feel like it's misplaced with a character like Death. He constantly drops F-bombs. Constantly. And it just kind of ruins the characterization of him for me. He's supposed to be this entity that's been around since the dawn of time, since the dawn of life. And maybe you can make the argument that he's like a reflection of like the worst aspects of humanity, I guess. I don't know. He's just a little too sarcastic. He's a little too foul, and I feel like he should be treated a little bit more seriously. That being said, Dracula was a super serious character, and so to have another super serious villain, not a lot of balance there. So Maybe I get why they went that in direction creatively, but I just feel like they could have cut back on the constant foul language. So again, just to kind of recap, Castlevania the series, fantastic, particularly those first two seasons. If nothing else, watch those first two seasons. The first two seasons, it ends well enough as a kind of cathartic conclusion. You don't need to watch seasons 3 and 4, but if you really do get invested, well, I guess there are a few cliffhanger bits at the end of season 2. So if you don't like cliffhangers, sorry, you're gonna have to end up watching seasons 3 and 4. But there is at least a kind of catharsis with the end of season 2. If you like the characters enough, season 3 is a bit of a filler season, and season 4 does not reach the heights of seasons 1 and 2, but it does have a satisfying conclusion and a really, really good villain in it. So I highly recommend the series in general. And if nothing else, if you're just sort of hey, just looking for something to watch, those first two seasons are really, really good. With all that being said, I am your most humble and obedient servant, Page Ghost.